Hello, welcome to Sunday. So today we are working on chapter 35, which is Pow Pow. Last time we finished out chapter 34, Rune Theory, which is when we basically thought about runes like, you needed a shape. And we had a whole lovely, fun testing and figuring out runes and all that in the sand, and we had ass blasters used like Nerf guns. We had octopuses doing the spin and throwing all kinds of crazy sand pellets back, and very fun. Okay, so I'm just going to read the very end of chapter 34 and then we'll start on chapter 35. Okay. You finally have magical and physical protection, he continued. Yes, finally, I replied. Are you happy, he asked with a twinkle in his eye. I looked at all the missiles sliding off me and just took in the wonder of the moment. Sure, the missiles were tiny, and sure, this wouldn't defend against everything, but now I finally had a layer of protection. Getting punched in the face by a golem had driven home just how weak I was, but I wasn't helpless anymore. Yes, I said. Very, very happy. Chapter 35, Pow Pow. I sat there for a few more moments, enjoying my happiness. Then I called an end to the test. I stood up and brushed all the sand off my clothes. I was covered in a lot more than I'd realized. Since we're here and in a testing mood, I have an idea, Tyler spoke up. What did you have in mind? I asked. You have two great runes that work with progressive resistance for defense. How about you see about tweaking them so they will work for attack? After all, progressive resistance is just the defensive side of relax and tense on contact. That is an excellent idea, Annabeth said enthusiastically, and I already have an idea of what you need. She sat down in the sand and started sketching. You'll only need these attack runes on your striking points, like your knuckles, as well as any area you're going to use for hard blocking. These areas are still going to need good defense, so I don't think you should go with a completely different rune variation. Instead, I think you should just take out the deflection part of what you're using now. After all, you want your punches to land solidly, not slide around on your opponent. She finished up her sand drawing and sat back so I could get a good look. It was the Four Birds rune, except the connecting lines didn't have a left or right slant. Instead, they radiated out smoothly from the horizontal line. That's an excellent idea, I replied. Let's give it a shot. One thing to keep in mind, Tyler said, is that timing is going to be everything. If the force rune triggers too early, it will slow you down and rob your punch of its power. If the force rune triggers too late, it will hit when you're starting to relax and withdraw your punch. I think that would mess up your wrist and your arm muscles. The force will have to grow in power at the same time you do, so it needs to start exploding with force as you start tensing. You're right, I nodded. I hadn't thought about that yet. Give me a moment while I make the changes and work with Red and the team on timing. I sat back on the ground and focused on Red. Did you get all that? I got it, he said quickly. You want to pack a punch, bring the hammer, pound them into the ground. It's slam time. I think you got the basic idea, I chuckled. Now, where are all the places we should change the rune? We changed it on my knuckles, of course, as well as on the edges of my forearms, where I did all my hard blocking. Then it dawned on me that for this to be the most effective, I needed to change it everywhere I used to block. It would suck to do a slap block and slide off my opponent's arm. We modified the runes on my palm as well as the outside edges of my hand. Then we started working on timing. I mentally punched over and over again until the hex network was triggering at exactly the right moment. After that, we started working on my blocks until those were timed right also. Once I was ready, I opened my eyes to see there was a three-way sand battle going on between the surfers, the grainies, and the tangle. I checked in to make sure they weren't really mad at each other, but they were just having fun. I was surprised to note that all my soul creations were now using the new force rune, not just the surfers. Nobody was really getting hit. but they were having a blast chasing each other around and slinging sandballs. They seemed happy, so I just let them play. They've been doing a lot of work for me, and they deserve to have some fun. I'm ready to test this out, I told Annabeth and Tyler. Although I'm a bit nervous and excited, I've been so focused on defense today that I never considered offense. If I could increase my punching power, that would be incredible. Then you'd be able to outpunch 3 centaurs, Tyler joked. We laughed, and I noticed Annabeth become quiet with a bit of a frown on her face. "What's up, Annabeth?" I asked. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke up. "I must admit I have a selfish reason for helping with all this." I gave her a puzzled look. I would never define Annabeth as selfish, but I let her continue. "I've had a breakthrough of my own on punching and blocking, and I'm hoping this force rune will help me even more." "That isn't being selfish," I told her. "That's just being smart. You are more than welcome to anything I can figure out. I've got some ideas for charms that I want to test out as well, so hopefully everybody comes out with a power boost." I turned to Tyler. "Even you might find this useful. I've seen new Centaur naturals make things with glass and become part of a massive charging circle, so I think there is a way for you to use runes also." "That sounds wonderful," he said. "I can use basic charms, of course, but I don't have the flexibility like you have with your soul creations. If you have found a way to boost my fighting ability, I'm all for it." I turned back to Annabeth. "So what is this incredible breakthrough you've had?" She looked at Tyler, and they shared a secret smile. "I'm going to keep that a surprise for now," she grinned slyly. "You'll hear all about it when we get to the arena." "Ooh, that sounds mysterious. I can't wait." I wanted to head to the arena right then and see what she was talking about. Whatever it was, it must be really good, as her new levels were exceptional. I still needed to finish up my own breakthrough first, though, and test my punching ability. To do that, I needed Sparkles, my Sandy training partner. "House, please summon Sparkles for me," I said. Immediately, the sand in front of me started mounding up. A tall, sandy figure formed in front of me. He looked muscular and powerful, like one of those Under Armour mannequins. He was my training partner, and with his help, I'd learned how to punch, block, and pigeon step. I hadn't been to the beach since the fight with Big Ugly, and it was really nice to see him again. "Why don't you start out with some basic punching," Tyler suggested, "without using your new force rune? On one hand, I'm sure you've gotten better, as you've spent a lot of time in the arena working your way up its levels. On the other hand, you haven't really trained while you were at the gathering, so you might be a bit rusty. Let's get a good baseline number before you add on the force rune." "Sounds good," I nodded and settled into my pigeon stance. "House, what is my current punching stat?" I asked. A scroll appeared in the air in front of me. "Mid-novice Jason punching stats. Level 10.3, ? Punches 0, - no current goal. Notes: like Tyler said, a lot has changed, and you haven't returned here to update your stats in a long time. I'm cautiously hopeful you've improved. Now, get to thumping." I always enjoyed the notes section. The house usually managed to be sarcastic, helpful, and encouraging all at the same time. I was feeling a bit nervous about what my new number was going to be, but Tyler and Annabeth were waiting, so I closed my eyes, centered myself, and called up my battle energy. I filled up my lower half with smooth water energy. It grounded me and allowed me to flow easily between punches. I filled up my upper half with smoky energy. Then I punched and summoned the lightning. It was amazing to me how quickly I fell back into my training routine. It felt familiar, like coming home again. My energy felt alive, my body felt eager, and my punches were certainly making an impact. When I had first started punching, it had taken everything I had to knock a few grains of sand off Sparkle's chest. Those days were long gone. Now my blows were knocking out craters of sand, and Sparkles was constantly working to repair the damage. I also noticed another difference. When I first started training, I hadn't used punches in battles before. Now I'd fought with Big Ugly, the Centaur Guard, and Eugene, and all that experience was feeding back into my training. I knew what it was like to hit someone for real, and that knowledge added extra depth to my practice. Once I was warmed up, I stepped up my intensity. Then I thought about my fight with the guard and stepped it up again. My fists were flying at maximum speed and my lightning was striking like a desert storm. I was hitting so hard and so fast, Sparkles couldn't repair fast enough. I heard a familiar bell. The house had raised my level, so I slowed down and then stopped. Wow, what a rush. That felt good. It was nice to let loose and let my power flow when my life wasn't on the line. I looked over at Tyler and Annabeth, and their eyes were wide in shock. "My goodness, Jason," Annabeth exclaimed. "When did you learn to punch like that?" I shrugged happily. "I'm not sure. It just sort of happened." "You've gotten a lot better," Tyler said. "Like, a lot. No wonder you were able to fight a centaur." "It's astonishing how quickly you've improved." "I have a good teacher," I said proudly. "Thank you, but I think I really have two exceptional students," Tyler noted. "I've seen my teachers training others, and I've seen lots of naturals learning to fight, but nobody's picked up the techniques as fast as you two." "That's really thanks to Annabeth's idea of a feedback loop." I gave her a smile. "She can hear magic and how movements should sound, so she was able to correct what she was doing a lot faster and better than most students. We then shared magic and I could do the same thing, only with sight and feeling." I thought about what else we'd done when we'd exchanged magic, and I felt myself getting a little hot. We'd certainly had good times. Almost too good. Tyler had gotten affected by his own sexual magic, and things had gotten out of control. I quickly pushed those thoughts out of my head and got back to what I should be focusing on. "House, what is my new punching stat?" I asked, and the scroll appeared in front of me again. I was the only one who could see it, so I read it out to Tyler and Annabeth. "High Novice, Jason Punch Stats, level 16.9. Punches 0, no current goal. Notes: you go girl, look at you getting all smack nasty. Real fighting suits you. Now let's see how those new runes of yours work out." "That's a great improvement," Tyler noted. "Most naturals grow quickly at the lower levels, but once they get above 10, their growth slows down a lot. For you to go up to 16 so fast is just fantastic, and you're not done yet. You still have your battle gauntlets to turn on." Battle gauntlets. I liked it. "Sparkles, I'm going to practice for a moment with my new runes before you start clocking me," I told him. Then I looked at Tyler and Sandy. "This won't take long, but I need to start out slowly and get used to my new power." They just nodded and stepped back. "Red," I called, "let's start out about 10% power. I don't want to have another training injury." "Right on," he replied, and I started punching. It certainly felt different. I had an extra impact at the end of my strike, and it was throwing me off a little bit. I had a timing issue, but the effect was too small to really fine-tune it. "Red, let's go to 20%, I called. This time, as I punched, I found the problem right away. The rune was ramping up faster than my punch tensed. It was increasing in a linear fashion, whereas my natural punching was more exponential. Once Red corrected the problem, it felt wonderful. "Red, let's go to 30% power, I called. My punches now had so much kick, they really felt like lightning. "Red, let's go to 40% power. Too much. It was too much. The blast when I hit was more than my bones and muscles could handle. Even grounded as I was, and with as much magic as I pushed into my body, it was still shaking me apart. I could go to this level in a battle situation where it was absolutely necessary and I had to hit as hard as I could. But if I used this for thousands of punches in training, then I'd be spending a lot of time recovering. I'd get stronger over time, but for now, 30% was as high as I was going to push it. I'm sure John with his mountain troll body could go all the way, and Tyler probably could too, but I'd need to get more powerful first. Still, it was nice that my forced rune would grow with me. I was surprised how all this was working out. I thought I'd just flip a switch and start using the rune. I never thought it would be too good for me to handle. I guess that's what happens when I make a perfectly tailored rune and match it with soul fragments. I stopped, rolled my shoulders, and sent Tyler and Annabeth an even bigger grin. This was gonna rock. It's time. Let's see what I can do. I turned to my training partner. Sparkles, I'm ready. Let's clock this and see what my new level is. Annabeth clapped in excitement as I settled into my pigeon stance. I summoned my battle magic, water, smoke, lightning, and let loose. It was awesome. I felt like I was one of those battle mechs from the movies, slamming into Sparkles with what felt like an insane amount of power. I was Zeus, blasting lightning into my foes. I was the Rock, punching out everything in sight. I was a natural with battle gauntlets. Sparkles was getting the short end of the stick as I was punching holes clean through him. He wasn't reforming fast enough, and I was having to switch up my target area so I had a spot to hit. In the middle of my volley, something changed for him. He got a bit taller and much denser. He seemed a bit thicker too. His rate of recovery increased significantly as well. I'd leveled up, and it seemed like he could too. Now that I had a better target, I ramped up to full speed again. His density would have torn up my hands before, but they felt just fine now, and I poured on the power. Finally, I heard a bell, and I slowed down and stopped. House, what is my punching stat? I called. Low student adjacent punch stats. Level 27.6. Punches 0, no current goal. Notes, excellent job. You've jumped into the student ranks. You've got a perfectly tuned superior rune, so now you're going to need to work on your physicality in order to use it to its maximum level. Goodness gracious, Annabeth exclaimed. In one afternoon you've jumped all the way up to my level. What is your level again? I asked. I'm at level 27.8, she replied, and my training partner, Mr. Pebbles, got updated as well. I looked at her short little body. She could punch like that now? Damn, girl, you are so badass. You haven't seen me in action yet, she laughed. Are you ready to head to the arena now? I most certainly was, but I had to put that on hold as Sandy and John showed up. My goodness, this is where you train? Sandy asked, in wonder, looking around the area with wide eyes. I assured her it was. I've heard you talk about it, but I had no idea it was this amazing. The scenery is breathtaking, and the air, she took a deep breath. It smells like adventures and vacation. We all laughed. Tell me you have margaritas too. No. She said, tell me you have margaritas too. She said it like she was joking, but the way she looked around showed she was half serious. And maybe a nice ale or lager? John chimed in hopefully. We have coffee in the locker room, Annabeth told them. It's a wonderful pick-me-up in the mornings, but we don't have anything harder than that. If we did, we might spend our time chilling on the beach rather than working out. You're probably right, Sandy agreed, but she still sounded wistful. Would you like a quick tour? Tyler asked, getting us back on track. Most certainly, John rumbled. This part of the beach is where you can work one-on-one with your training partner, Tyler said in his teaching voice. It's made of sand so it can morph into whatever you need. You can work on punching, blocking, moving, projectiles, you name it. Whatever you need to improve, your training partner can help. The best is you can go full out as you can't hurt it. The worst you can do is knock it apart, and if you do, it just reforms again. Jason was just working on his punching, so perhaps he could give us a demonstration? Sure, I shrugged. I was already warmed up, so I settled into my stance and cut loose. I went full speed for about a minute, and then I stopped. This was just a demonstration after all, and I wasn't really training. John looked shocked. This was the first time he'd really seen me punch. Sandy had seen me fight Eugene, but even so, she looked impressed too. Do you mind if I punch it a few times? Sandy asked politely. I didn't want to break any house rules, so I turned to my partner. Sparkles, would it be okay if Sandy and John worked with you for a few minutes? He solemnly nodded his head. Sandy and John looked surprised again. I think they had thought Sparkles was more like a statue, not a magical being made out of sand. You call him Sparkles? John asked. I nodded. I was training out here one morning and the sand was slightly wet. The sun lit him just right and he started sparkling like he was made of diamonds. I wanted to give him a name because training partner sounds so impersonal and he's already helped me out so much. I like it, John said. It suits him. My training partner is called Mr. Pebbles, Annabeth chimed in. He's already imposing enough, so I didn't want to give him a deadly sounding name. I noticed he had little pebbles mixed in with all that sand, and I added the Mr. from Mr. Rogers. After all, this is a lovely neighborhood. She gestured at the sea and the beautiful beach. I think it's perfect, Sandy smiled. Now, is there any special way I'm supposed to hit Sparkles? Just stand however you are comfortable with and hit him however you want, Tyler replied. Sandy got into what looked to be a basic boxing stance, hauled her fist back, and punched Sparkle in his solar plexus. She knocked off a tiny trickle of sand. She grimaced, set her stance a bit wider, and tried again. There was slightly more sand this time. Sandy tried a few more times and then stopped, shaking her hand in pain. That is really hard, she exclaimed. I thought sand would be a bit softer. Jason, how the heck were you hitting it that hard for so long? You must have fists of steel. Magic, I said mysteriously and wiggled my eyebrows at her. She burst out laughing. Seriously though, Sparkles just had an upgrade, so he's much denser and tougher than before. Your initial training partner will be much easier until you get used to him. Now I'm reminded why I fight with my brass knuckles, Sandy said, shaking her head. I've never really learned how to fight barehanded before. I've trained with my magic and I know the basics, but that's it. I think it's something I need to learn, though. It certainly made both of you a lot more powerful. I could teach you if you wanted, Tyler offered. I would like that very much, Sandy replied. Now I'd like to try it again, but this time I'm going to add some magic. Go for it, Tyler said. The Grand Matron added a lot of Morphos points, so these training partners can upgrade quite a bit and take a lot of abuse. You might hit harder than Sparkles can handle, but your own partner will upgrade to fit what you need. Sandy nodded, set herself, and then started hitting again. This time her hands were surrounded by tiny blue flames, and she was certainly hitting a lot harder. I think the flames were protecting her fists and helping her power, but she still wasn't blowing Sparkles apart. In fact, based on how much sand she was knocking off, she still wasn't hitting as hard as I could with my new rune. She pounded on Sparkles for a few moments before she stopped. I think she'd really given it a good shot because she was breathing hard. That is much harder than it looks, she said. This is going to be a great way to train. I've really only sparred with people before, and I've always held back a bit as I didn't want to accidentally hurt them. I'm really looking forward to getting my own partner and working my way up the levels. I think I would like to try now, John said. He seemed pretty eager to see how he would do. Sandy moved out of the way and John got into position. His first punch was more of a light tap as he got a feeling for the distance and the target. His next punch was harder. He shifted and punched a few more times. Then he really let loose. He looked so freaking powerful, I thought he would tear Sparkles apart, but he didn't. Instead, his punches had slightly less impact than my own. Wow, was I hitting harder than John? It seemed insane to even think that. He pounded on it for about a minute and then stopped. I noticed his hands had a gray cast to them. Was he adding a bit of stone to his hands to protect them? If so, that was cool. Sparkles is a wall, he said admiringly. He's a freaking wall. Damn, Jason, just how hard can you hit? I laughed. And keep in mind, Annabeth is rated higher than me, I said. I can't wait to see her in the arena. Sandy and John both gave Annabeth a long look. I'm sure the thought that our little grandmother was such a powerhouse was blowing their mind. I'd seen her train, and I knew she was awesome, but it still blew me away too. "Let me give it one more shot, then I'm ready to move on," Tyler said. This time he really centered himself, and I could see gray magic starting to ripple over him. Whatever he did made a big difference, because when he started punching again, he gave Sparkles a run for his money. His fists were knocking giant craters out of Sparkles. He was struggling to reform his sand and keep up. I decided to have some fun, so I called out to Sparkles, "Pigeon step." Sparkles smoothly stepped back into the side just as John tried to blast him with a mighty blow. John was given all he had, and when his target suddenly disappeared, he overbalanced, tripped, and almost fell on his face. Not to be outdone, he recovered, pivoted, and attacked again. Sparkles shifted so he only landed a glancing blow, and soon John was chasing Sparkles around the beach, trying to get back to his former level of power. Finally, he stopped and gave us a big grin. "That was the most fun I've had sparring in a long time," he declared happily. "Sandy's right. This is going to be a wonderful place to train." I thanked Sparkles, who bowed and then fell into a mound of sand. We turned and moved on. Our next stop was the big door, just sitting on its own in the sand. Sandy and John looked very quizzical until we opened it and went inside. "Oh, wow," John exclaimed. "This place is fancy. When you said you had a locker room, I was thinking white walls and tiled floors like you'd find at a boxing gym. This is more like a country club. I like it." Tyler gave them a quick tour, and Sandy loved the wooden locker with their name on it and her workout clothes all ready to go. Best of all, the clothes washed themselves, Annabeth chimed in happily. "For real?" Sandy asked. "Oh yes, you just leave your dirty ones in the locker, and the next time you come back, they're all clean, folded, and ready to go." I think that was Annabeth's favorite thing about this place, and Sandy thought it was pretty special too. When we got to the drawer by the sinks, I took over as I couldn't wait to show them the Tillman and Tittles bars. "You have Tillman and Tittles bars," John exclaimed, and looked them over like they were pure gold. "Have you had them before?" I asked. "Oh, yes," he said reverently. "It's been a while, but once you've had a Tillman and Tittles bar, you never forget it." I handed out bars and we chowed down. John gushed the whole time at just how good they were. I had my favorite, fried chicken, and then found a new one, mushroom risotto. I don't know how they pulled it off, but they did. The outer part of the bar looked and tasted like mushrooms, while the inside was composed of little pearls that tasted like risotto. It was perfectly delicious. I don't know how the drawer updated, but sometimes we'd have lots of one item, like cucumber salad with ranch dressing, and then it would be gone. It was nice that it rotated in new flavors, but I missed some of my favorites. We moved on, and Tyler pointed out the massive couch in case they needed a place to relax or take a nap between training sessions. I saw Sandy flash a saucy glance at John, and I almost snickered. I was pretty sure she was thinking about getting John to play Vacation Heiress and Full Service Cabana Boy. I'm sure she wouldn't have to try too hard. Sandy and John got dressed in workout gear, and we headed out to the arena. I was so excited because I was finally going to get to see what Annabeth had been up to. The arena was the only large permanent structure on the beach. It was 30 steps long by about 20 wide. It had sand walls that went way up over 10 feet, with an observation area on the side facing the rest of the gym. It seemed pretty big as it stretched from the tree line almost to the water. John and Sandy marveled at the whole thing as they climbed up on the observation deck and settled into sandy chairs. The deck had a roof and a back wall, so it provided shade, and yet it was still open to a cool breeze. "Jason, what's your arena level again?" Tyler asked. "The last time I fought here I was 31, I replied. "Before you watch Annabeth fight, why don't you test your shield and battle gauntlets?" Tyler suggested. "You need to fully celebrate how much you've improved before you move on and challenge yourself again." I was really anxious to see what Annabeth was hiding, but Tyler was my teacher. If he wanted me to go first, then that's what I would do. Plus, he was right. It would be nice to see just how much my defense and offense had improved since the last time I'd been here. "What do the levels mean?" Sandy asked, and I heard Tyler explaining how the points worked as I walked down the steps into the arena. The house used the level points to distribute between the attackers. The more points it put into one sand character, the stronger, faster, and more resilient it was. In addition to basic melee characters, the house also had ranged attackers that shot sand bolts. It could also give its attackers weapons. The number of opponents also varied between matches, as the house could spend 31 points on one massively powerful opponent or use 31 slow and weak opponents. The arena normally didn't go that extreme though, and I usually faced somewhere between 3 and 10 attackers. When I won several matches in a row, my level gradually went up, and so did the difficulty of the matches. It was a good system and allowed me to fight hard without getting discouraged. The last time I'd fought, my opponents had felt tough. It had taken multiple punches to bring them down, and I'd had to stay on my toes to keep away from their blows, which had been powerful enough to knock me around. These sand people weren't playing. When they hit, they hurt. I spotted the circle on the sand which would start the match, and I took a moment to swing my arms and roll my head. Then I went into a full squat and jumped into the air. I did that a few times to make sure I was warmed up, loose, and ready to go. I stepped into the circle and the match was on. 3 brawlers appeared, 2 in front of me and 1 behind. A ranged mage also materialized in the distance, so I was facing 4 opponents total. That gave each of them around 7 to 8 points apiece, which meant they were all going to be fast and tough. In matches like this, it was important to take out someone quickly. And the 3rd brawler behind me was the closest, so I spun and went after him. I took about 3 steps and was already in range. He threw a fast punch, but I was much faster. I slipped to his side, threw a punch, and was already following it up in the second one when I realized what I'd done. I'd taken him out with 1 shot. Holy cow! My punch had hit his side and the shockwave had spread through his body and blasted out the other side. He'd already lost cohesion and was falling apart. I was so shocked I just stood there. And that's when the sand mage hit me. The mage opponents in the arena couldn't actually shoot fireballs or force bolts or anything like that. Instead, they shot thick bullets of sand, and if they hit, they really hurt. It didn't hurt this time though. My hex network flared to life and deflected the sand right off of me. I felt the pressure as all that momentum had to go somewhere, but it just felt like a gentle push. I'd had those bullets spin me around before, so for them to be neutralized so effectively was awesome. I took 2 more hits, just for fun, and burst out laughing for the sheer joy of it all. I had a shield, an honest-to-God, fully working shield. Wow. 1 and 2 caught up to me and started to attack. I speed punched both of them and they blew apart. Damn, this was fun. The only opponent left was the mage, and it was still shooting at me. I didn't have a ranged attack of my own, so I sprinted towards him. I dodged his shots as I didn't want to get too complacent. I had a shield now, but it still ran on my magic, and I didn't want to start being wasteful. I quickly reached him and punched him out. Match over. "How's my ass doing?" I asked my analytical side anxiously. "I think it's doing good," he replied. He did a quick scan. "Is something wrong?" He sounded worried. "I just wanted you to check because it's bad, you know it, it's bad. The whole world has to answer right now. I'm a badass." I tried to moonwalk, but it was on sand and it didn't work out so well. My analytical side just rolled his eyes and groaned. I almost couldn't believe how easy the match had been. Red and his hex network had made a huge difference. Like, huge. I felt so good I ran back to the exit and sprinted up the stairs to the observation deck. John was looking so comfortable in the sand chair, I considered changing the name of the place to The Lounge. That was absolutely fantastic, Sandy said. You made that look so easy. It felt easy too, I replied. My new force runes made a huge difference. Was that moonwalking I saw? John snickered. It was more like sand walking, I said wryly, and it's not something I think I should try again. You looked more like a chicken scratching, John laughed. The rest of it looked good, but I'd figure out another victory dance if I were you. He gave me an affectionate swat on the butt because he was still sitting down. He gave me an affectionate swat on the butt because he was still sitting down and he was feeling too comfortable to reach any higher. I grabbed Annabeth to keep myself from being knocked off the platform. Now that John has perfected the force rune and tested it out on Sparkles in the arena, I think it's time for Annabeth to show us what she can do, Tyler said. Finally. I started clapping and everyone else joined in. Annabeth smiled and gave us a happy bow. Then she went down the steps into the arena. What level is she at? Sandy asked. She's at level 63, Tyler replied. So it's almost double what John faced. Just faced, John noted. Tyler nodded. Annabeth took a few moments to warm up and get her blood flowing. Then she stepped into the circle, and it was game time. When I saw her opponents, I was so surprised I stood up. She was facing 3 opponents, and they all had long spears. Bloody hell. With 3 opponents, that means each of them had 21 points apiece. They were going to be tougher and faster than anything I'd seen before. What really made them extra deadly, though, were their spears. That gave them reach, speed, and a way to keep Annabeth at a distance where she couldn't punch them. If she did get in range, they could treat their spear like a staff, which was an excellent short-range weapon. I'm sure Annabeth was amazing, but this fight was impossible. Her only advantage was that the 3 of them started on the other side of the arena. That gave her a brief moment to strategize as they started running towards her. Opponent 1 on the left was the fastest and seemed to have more of a speed build. 2 in the middle was a balance of speed and power, and 3 on the right was slightly slower but more solid. I say he was slightly slower, but 3 was still faster than the opponents I'd faced just a few minutes ago. When facing multiple opponents, the best thing to do is to find a way to split them up. Then you can work the angles so that the opponent you're attacking is blocking 1 or more of your other opponents. It still takes a lot of speed, strategy, and good footwork to make it happen. In this case, the difference in how fast they ran towards her helped a lot. 1 reached her first and led with the spear's thrust. Annabeth only had a second to do something with him as the other 2 were right on his heels. Zoom! She exclaimed and launched forward like she'd been shot out of a cannon. She deflected his thrust and closed with him before he could recover. Pow pow, she explained again, and hit him 2 times in rapid succession. He was much bigger than she was, so she landed both shots in his right hip. He staggered back and fell to the ground. He wasn't out of the fight, but he wasn't going to be mobile for a few moments at least. Zoom! She exclaimed and darted backward. That was smart because it got her out of the reach of the fallen 1 and kept 2 in front of 3. When 2 got close, she darted in and landed a few blows on him too. Again, it didn't take him out of the fight, but it knocked him on his ass. And that set her up perfectly to focus on number 3. He was slower but much smarter. Instead of coming after her, he switched to using his spear as a staff. That was the perfect choice for him, as Annabeth had already proven she could get around the reach of a spear. Annabeth closed with him, but he played defense and she found it hard to land a killing blow. He was more durable, and that let him weather her blows, and gave 1 or 2 a chance to recover and get back on their feet. She couldn't let that happen, and she didn't. She found the opening she was looking for, and she switched her from pow to boom. That did the trick. Her power punch knocked his arm off, and his spear went flying. 3 tried to turtle up and recover, but she power punched his head, and he collapsed in a pile of sand. Two was back on his feet, and he played defense until one was up. Annabeth was in trouble, as even two injured spear wielders were a lot to handle. Annabeth surprised me if she switched her focus from 2 to 1 after luring 2 out of position. One's leg was still shot, and she used his lack of mobility to close with him and take him out. Now she only had a single opponent left. 2 stayed in close and kept throwing short, vicious jabs that were hard to block. I noticed Annabeth was making whooshing noises, and that seemed to throw off his aim. It hit me just how brilliant Annabeth's new powers were. She was using sounds to shape her magic in a way that helped her with the fight. She was literally being her own video game. Martial artists have been using a kai or shout for hundreds of years to focus their energy and give them more power. Annabeth, as a sonic mage, had used that idea and taken it to the next level. Why stop at just power punching when you can boost your movement with a well-timed zoom? And why not add something that deflects an attack with a whoosh? It was so perfect and so simple. If she needed a new effect, she just made up a new sound that made sense to her. She would be the perfect comic book hero. All she'd need was the explosion-looking graphic that went with the POW in the old Batman comic books. Maybe I could be a Robin. I was already gay, skinny, and witty, so I'd fit right in. Now I just needed a superhero costume, preferably one that made my butt, abs, and package look awesome. Maybe NL could put something together for me. I'd gotten mentally sidetracked, so I almost missed the end of Annabeth's fight. She knocked 2's spear out of position, closed with him, and boomed him right through the chest. He fell in a pile of sand, and the match was over. We jumped and cheered and celebrated our awesome victory, and she gave a tired bow. She climbed up the steps to the observation deck, and we hugged and congratulated her again. Her fight had truly been spectacular. She not only had excellent new powers, but her tactical command of the situation had been spot on. Sandy and John started talking strategy, and both of them seemed excited and anxious to get into the arena. Tyler said it was a lot harder than it looked, and he suggested they start out at level 1 and work their way up. They didn't disagree with him, but they both thought they had plenty of experience and were ready to jump right in. Would you like to try the scenario that Annabeth just completed? Tyler suggested with a sly grin. I have to warn you, it's much harder than it appears from up here. Sandy and John looked at each other, a whole conversation happening in just a glance. I would like to try it, Sandy declared. I would too, John chimed in. I'm sure the house will let us modify the rules just this once, Tyler said. Then he flashed a mischievous grin. I think you both are going to get your asses handed to you. So would you care to make this more interesting? And we have arrived at the end of this particular chapter, chapter 35. I will see you guys next week when Sandy and John step into the ring.